Hi and welcome. I'm trying to learn history. Today, the search for Troy. And after we've done that, we're going to do stretching. And if you participate in the stretching, then is that ZKOZWXKJ. This is part 2 of the search for Troy. And now we want to go over all these informations, gather them together, and try to make a presentation out of them. The search for Troy. Troy is a city in the ancient Greek poet Homer's famous epic, the Iliad. It was once thought to be entirely mythical. Okay, Troy is a major city named in the book Iliad by the author Homer. And this Homer person lived around 2,500 years ago in Greek, in southeastern Europe. In 1822, British scholar Charles McLaren suggested that Homer's Troy might be in Turkey, which is in southeastern Europe. He pinpointed a mound called Hirsalik near the Dardanelles, a narrow sea linking the Black Sea and the Aegean. I think now the Dardanelles is the sea. And the Dardanelles would link the Black Sea with the Aegean Sea. Then it must be the little strait of water in the middle of Istanbul. Because that is the only, as far as I know, entrance point to the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea with the Aegean Sea in it. I'm going to take it like that. If it's wrong, then I'm going to find out. Now we have made my position so clear. I see. Okay, Troy, it was thought to be just an invention by Homer in the Iliad book, but then in 1822 there was Charles McLaren. Okay, we have to have that name, Charles McLaren, and he then had the idea that it might be at the Mount Hirsalik, which is near the Dardanelles, which is the strait of water between, in the middle for Turkey, through Istanbul, which is a strait, which is the sea between a narrow sea between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea. Charles McLaren, 1822. Then there was the German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, and he began digging at Hirsalik Mountain in 1871. In 1873, did then Heinrich Schliemann uncovered fortifications and remains of a very ancient city which he believed to be Troy. Okay, 1822, Charles McLaren had the suggestion that it might be Troy by Hirsalik, by the Mount Hirsalik, in the vicinity of, near the Dardanelles, which is a narrow sea linking the Black Sea with the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. And then in 1871, there was now Heinrich Schliemann, and he was there archaeologically digging. And then in 1873, after 2 years, he found fortifications and the remains of a very ancient city. Schliemann also found a treasure of gold and silver, which he called Priam's treasure, after the Trojan king Priam mentioned in the Iliad. He smuggled this out of Turkey to take to Europe. Maybe we're going to say it, let's make it clear as we would say it. And he found a treasure which he called Priam's treasure in the story of Homer's Iliad, where Priam is the king of Troy, and he then smuggled it to Europe. In 1876, Schliemann was digging at Mycenae, Greek. So now another place. He came across what he thought was the tomb of Agamemnon, king of the Trojans, enemies in Homer's Iliad. In 1876, then, so 3 years after that, 1871, 1873, and 1876 now, where did Schliemann in Mycenae, in Greek, found a tomb, and he believed it to be the tomb of Agamemnon, who was in Homer's Iliad, the king of the people who besieged Troy. In the 1890s, where was William Dorfield? So we're having Charles McLaren, Charles McLaren, and Heinrich Schliemann, and now William Dorfield. He showed that Hirsalik Mount is made of 9 layers of city remains. This is because the city was destroyed by fire or earthquakes 9 times. Each time the survivors built on the rubble. And in the 1890s then there was William Dornfield, and he showed that this Mount Herzalik near the Dardanelles in Turkey was 9 layers of cities on top of each other. And it was a couple of times so destroyed and now rebuilt on top of the other one. Heinrich Schliemann thought Homer's Troy was Troy the second layer from the bottom. Dornfield thought it was Troy the sixth. We don't know, but let's continue. Troy 1 to 5 are now thought to date from the early Bronze, 3000 to 1900 before Christ. Experts now think Homer's Troy may be Troy 7 or 7a, a layer of a 7th city dating from about 1250 before Christ. Okay. Now the first thing to the Schliemann found the tomb of Agamemnon. But the gold mask he found was actually 300 years earlier than Agamemnon lived. So the tomb was not the real one, but the remains of Troy seem to be the real one at Herzalik. But the tomb was probably the treasures of but the gold mask found in the tomb was 300 years earlier, so it was probably not of Agamemnon. Okay, Troy 1 to 5 are from the Bronze Age, 5000 to 4000 years ago. And now the idea is that the Troy mentioned in Homer's Iliad is Troy 7, around 3250 years ago. Charles McLaren, that is McLaren, it was in 1822, Herzalik, with quite a lot of information. I'm going to start the camera. And he found the treasure twice. Okay, twice a treasure. One treasure there in Herzalik, Dardanelles, so Europe, and then 1876 at Mykene in Greek, which was 300 years older. William Dornfield. I'm actually not that sure if I've mentioned of, but let's try it at least. The search for Troy. Troy, the city Troy is mentioned in the book called Iliad, written by Homer 3000 years ago. And it was long believed that Troy was just an invention of this author Homer about that story. But then people thought maybe there's some truth in it. Now, in the year 1822, there was Charles McLaren. And he had the idea that Troy might be at the Mount Herzalik, near the Dardanelles, which is a narrow sea link between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So there at Herzalik. And in 1871 there went then Heinrich Schliemann, and he started to dig there after the city in Herzalik. And actually in 1873 he found remains of an ancient city and remains of fortifications. He also found that treasure, and he called it Priam's treasure. He smuggled it to Europe, from Turkey to Europe, and he called it Priam's treasure because he thought it was the one of the king of the Trojans, and that was Priam, so Priam's treasure. But in 1876 he was digging at Mykene in Greek, and there he found also a treasure, and he found a tomb with treasures inside, and he thought it was Agamemnon's tomb, but the gold mask in it found dates 300 years earlier, so it was probably not Agamemnon's tomb. Then there was William Dornfield, and in the 1890s was he then again in Turkey at Herzalik, at the Dardanelles, and he then, I have no idea what he did. It was the thing with the 9 layers. He found out that there were 9 layers on top of each other. And 1 to 5 are from 5000, 4000 bronze, and Troy is 7. 3250. The search for Troy. Troy is the name of a city mentioned in the book Iliad, written by Homer, a Greek poet who lived 3200 years ago in Greek. Now, and it was believed that Troy was completely fictional, just an invention for the story. But then in 1822 there was Charles McLaren, and he suggested that it might be the the Mount Herzalik near the Dardanelles, which is a narrow sea linking the Black Sea to the Aegean Sea at the Mediterranean Sea, so there in Greek and Turkey. Herzalik and Turkey. Now, and when in 1871 Heinrich Schliemann went there and he did archaeological work, and he found when in 1873 remains of an ancient city and fortifications. And he found also a treasure which he smuggled back to Europe, and he called that treasure Priam's treasure. Priam was in Homer's story the king of Troy, so Priam's treasure. Then was he sometime later in 1876. 1876. The search for Troy. Troy is the name of a city mentioned in the book Iliad, written by Homer 3,200 years ago, a Greek poet Homer. Now, and it was believed that this city Troy was entirely fictional. But then in 1822 there was Charles McClarence, and he suggested that this Troy was at the Mount Herzalik in Turkey, near the Dardanelles, which is a narrow sea linking the Black Sea to the Aegean Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean Sea. And then in 1871 there was Heinrich Schliemann, and he went to Turkey, where Herzalik, that place there at the Dardanelles, and he was digging there. And in 1873 he found remains of an ancient city and remains of fortifications. And he found also a treasure, which he called then Priam's treasure, because he thought it was one of the king of Troy, and his name was in the book Priam. He smuggled that treasure to Europe. Then in 1876 was Heinrich Schliemann digging in Mokain, which is in Greek, but it's close to Turkey. And there he found a tomb, and he thought that it was the tomb of Agamemnon, the king of a besieging army to Troy. But a gold mask found that it was actually 300 years older, so it was probably not Agamemnon's tomb. Then there was William Dorpfield, and in the 1890s he suggested that this Troy found there at Herzalik, if it is Troy, is a city made out of 9 layers. So Herzalik, there were found 9 layers of city on top of each other. Troy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now it is now believed that Troy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were in Turkey at Mount Herzalik, near the Dardanelles, but narrow link between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. There at Herzalik, 9 layers of Troy. 1 to 5, Troy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are from the Bronze Age, which was 5,000 to 4,000 years old, are these 5 layers. And that the Troy mentioned in Homer's Iliad is Troy 7 or 7a. So the idea is that actually there at Herzalik, there in Turkey, at the Dardanelles, Troy 7a is the Troy mentioned in Homer's Iliad. And that is according to Meitzkel's World History on the page 126 and 127. And close to the camera. And that was the history part. If you go here for history, you can go directly to the next part of history. If you stay here and participate in our 2-minute stretching, then it's better to obviously. We're having the feet standing together, and we're doing the rooting tree. 1 foot to the outside, other one. Out, out. Now with the toes, heel, heel. A bit more. As far as you can go. And then in again. But stay with the head down. So don't come up. Go on the knees. Now up. Leg shoulder wide apart, breathe in, up it comes. And breathe out over to one side. Breathe in into the middle. Out over to the other side. In into the middle. Then the arms down. Breathe again in. Out one hand slides down the leg, the other shoulder stays down. Breathe again in. Out one arm over. Again in. Out and back. Breathe again in. Out one hand slides down the leg, the other shoulder stays down. Breathe in. Out one arm over. Breathe in out the ribcage. And out and back. And now, we're ending, we don't have time left. We're breathing in, going down. And breathe again out. Again in. Out. One more time. In. Out. In. Out. Breathe in and cross the legs. And breathe again out. It was a shortened stretching. I thank you very much and until next time.